right, so Madeline Miller's Circe, it's everywhere, right?
Yeah, it's the book everyone's talking about.
But, like, is it actually good? Is it worth the time? I feel like that's what people really want to know.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what we're here for today.
To help figure that out.
That's right. We've got a ton of reviews.
Like all sorts, all right?
Yeah, we've got professional critics. We've got, your average everyday reader.
Okay, cool. So
Basically, we want to look at all of it and help you figure out, is this book for you?
perfect. So give me the quick pitch, like who should be picking this up? Who's the target audience?
Okay, so think Greek mythology, but like from a woman's perspective.
Okay.
So this is really for anyone who loves those classic stories but wants something a little different.
Okay.
Especially if you like stories about self-discovery, those characters who kind of like break the mold.
Okay. I can see that appealing to a lot of people.
Yeah,
I've heard good things about the writing, but also that it can be a bit slow.
that's true. It's definitely a very character-driven story.
Okay.
But I think what really hooks people is how Miller makes Circe like a real person.
Right.
Even though she's this goddess with these crazy powers, you really connect with her struggles. You
Yeah.
see her go from like this naive nymph who just wants to fit in
Mm-hmm.
to this powerful witch who embraces her own strength.
That sounds pretty cool, actually. But remind me, who is Circe exactly? Like, what's her deal in the original myths? Vaguely remember something about pigs.
Yeah, she's totally known for that
right.
in the Odyssey. She's kind of just like this obstacle that Odysseus has to deal with on his way home.
All right. Right.
But Miller like flips that whole thing on its head.
Okay.
So Circe is the daughter of Helios, the sun god,
Mm-hmm.
but she's not like her family at all. She's drawn to mortals, and she's really into witchcraft, which the other gods see as super dangerous.
Oh, so that's why she ends up exiled on that island.
Yeah, yeah.
Aya, right.
Exactly. Exile is basically like her chance to break free from all that divine drama and figure out who she really is.
Okay.
And Miller's writing really makes it all come to life. Like, there's this one quote where she describes sorcery, and she says it's a craft. It must be made and worked, planned and searched out, dug up, dried, chopped and ground, cooked, spoken over, and sung.
Wow. Okay,
It's beautiful.
yeah, that is a beautiful quote. I could see how that would really, like, ground the magic in reality.
Yeah,
But didn't some reviewers have issues with the pacing? I feel like I read that somewhere.
that's definitely a common criticism. And yeah, I mean, it's a slow burn. It's not like an action-packed adventure or anything.
Okay.
But even though most of the story takes place on Circe's island,
Yeah.
she does have these really interesting encounters with other big names from Greek mythology. Like we see Prometheus,
Oh, wow.
the guy who gave fire to humans. We see Daedalus, the inventor,
Uh-huh.
and even Odysseus himself, all from Circe's point of view.
Wait, hold on, Odysseus. Like from the Odyssey?
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm interested.
And it's really eye-opening to see him through her eyes.
I bet.
He's not just that, classic hero that we know from the original epic.
Right.
Miller shows us his flaws, his manipulations, and how he treats women. It's a totally different perspective.
Okay, so it's kind of like we're getting this behind-the-scenes look at these iconic characters. Like we see the real them, warts and all.
Exactly.
But I am curious how the feminist themes are handled. I know some reviewers felt it could have gone further.
Yeah, it's tricky. On the one hand, you have Circe, like, totally defying expectations, embracing her power in this world ruled by men.
Mhm.
She learns to rely on herself and make her own choices, even if it means going against the gods.
Right,
But at the same time, Miller's working within these ancient myths, which are, like, inherently patriarchal.
right. Yeah, that makes sense. So it's not like a straightforward girl power narrative, but there's definitely a lot to unpack about how Circe navigates a world that's constantly trying to limit her.
Absolutely. And it's especially interesting how Miller portrays motherhood.
Oh, yeah. How does that play out?
Circe's relationship with her son, Telegonus, becomes like this major driving force in the story.
I was actually going to ask about that. Motherhood isn't really a central theme in most Greek myths, at least not from the mother's side.
Right, and that's what makes Miller's take so refreshing.
I see.
Circe's love for Telegonus really shapes her choices,
Mhm.
and it leads her to confront some of the most powerful figures in the pantheon.
Really?
She becomes this fiercely protective mother who's willing to risk everything for her child.
That sounds pretty advanced. Does it ever feel like it falls into that stereotypical motherly sacrifice trope, though?
I don't think so. Miller avoids that trap by showing us how complex Circe's feelings are. Yeah, she loves her son deeply, but she doesn't lose sight of her own needs and ambitions.
Okay, good.
She's a fully realized character, not just a one-dimensional mother figure.
Yeah, that's always a good thing. I'm always a little wary of those overly sentimental portrayals of motherhood. It's more interesting to see characters who are both strong and vulnerable,
For sure.
like real women,
And that's definitely what you get with Circe. She's flawed, she makes mistakes, but she keeps learning and growing throughout the story.
That makes me want to read it even more. Okay, before we get too deep into this, I have to ask, is this connected to the Song of Achilles at all?
It's a standalone story,
Okay.
but you do see some familiar names like Achilles and Patroclus, since Circe's story spans centuries. But you don't need to have read the Song of Achilles to enjoy this one.
Gotcha. Good to know. I haven't read that one yet, but it is on my list.
Well, if you like Circe, I think you'll really like that one too.
Okay.
They both have that same, gorgeous writing style
Mm-hmm.
and that focus on character development.
Cool. Okay, so we've talked about some criticisms, but what would you say are like the biggest strengths of the book overall?
Honestly, it's the writing for sure. It's so evocative and sensual. You can practically feel the ocean breeze and smell the herbs in Circe's garden.
Wow.
And Miller isn't afraid to tackle some really complex themes.
Like what?
Exile, power, and the choices we make to define ourselves. It's all in there.
Okay, so the writing is great, the themes are thought-provoking, and the characters are complex, but I'm still a little hung up on that slower pace. Can you give me like a specific example of what makes the story engaging, even if it's not super action-packed?
Sure. So one part that really stands out is Circe's encounter with Daedalus.
Daedalus, okay.
The guy who made the wings for Icarus.
Right, right.
We see him not just as this genius inventor, but also as a grieving father who's haunted by his son's death.
Oh, wow, okay.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And it adds this whole other layer to Daedalus that you don't get from the traditional myth.
I see.
He's not just this figure from legend. He's a human being with emotions and vulnerabilities.
Okay, I could see how those smaller character-driven moments would be really powerful.
Yeah.
I'm also curious how the male characters are portrayed in general. With Greek myth retellings, that can be a little bit of a sensitive topic.
That's a great question. And it's true, a lot of the male characters, especially the gods, they embody those classic negative traits.
Like what?
They're power-hungry, impulsive, and often pretty dismissive of women.
Which is unfortunately pretty true to the source material.
Yeah, for sure. But Miller also gives us glimpses of their vulnerabilities.
Okay.
She reminds us that even gods are capable of feeling loss, regret, even compassion.
That's a good point.
And then you have characters like Daedalus who really challenge those stereotypical portrayals of masculinity.
Okay, so it sounds like Miller is trying to present a more nuanced view of gender dynamics.
Definitely. She's not interested in simple binaries or easy answers. She wants to explore the full spectrum of human experience, regardless of gender.
That's awesome. Okay, you've definitely got my attention. Now I'm leaning towards adding Circe to my to-read list.
Great.
But before I make my final decision, I want to hear more about those comparisons to other books. You mentioned the Song of Achilles, but what about other novels with similar themes or characters?
Okay, well, if you want another Greek myth retelling from a woman's perspective, Ariadne by Jennifer Saint is really good.
Okay.
It reimagines the story of Theseus and the Minotaur from Ariadne's point of view.
Interesting.
So it explores themes of sisterhood, betrayal, and, finding your own path in a world dominated by men.
I've heard good things about that one.
It's really good.
I love these retellings that give a voice to the characters who were often just kind of like side notes in the original myths.
Me too, and Ariadne really highlights her strength and resilience.
Nice. Okay, that's going on the list for sure. Any others?
There's also Daughter of Sparta by Claire M. Andrews.
Okay.
It's a reimagining of the Helen of Troy story.
No way, really.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It explores the events that led to the Trojan War from her perspective.
I always felt like Helen got kind of a bad rap in the traditional telling.
Yeah.
It's nice to see someone giving her side of the story.
Right, and Daughter of Sparta does a great job of showing us all the political stuff going on. And the societal pressures that shaped her life.
Interesting.
So it really challenges that whole face that launched 1,000 ships thing.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, you've convinced me. Ariadne, Daughter of Sparta, Circe, they're all going on my list.
Awesome.
I love a good mythological retelling, especially one that focuses on strong women.
I think you'll really enjoy them. They all offer these new perspectives on these classic myths
Yeah.
and make us rethink the stories we thought we knew.
That's what I love about these kinds of books. They make the past feel like relevant
Totally.
and relatable, even though they're dealing with gods and monsters.
Right, exactly. And they remind us that even these ancient stories can speak to the challenges and triumphs we face in our own lives.
Absolutely. Okay, this has been a really great conversation so far.
Good, I'm glad.
I feel like I have a much better understanding of Circe now
Yeah,
and the other books you've recommended, which is awesome.
good.
What about you? What stands out to you the most about Circe?
Honestly, I think it's just the idea of seeing these familiar characters through Circe's eyes,
Yeah?
And that quote about sorcery being a craft, that really stuck with me too.
Yeah, me too.
I can already tell that Miller's writing is going to be one of the highlights.
I think so too. And I'm really interested to see how she handles the themes of power and motherhood.
I think you'll be impressed.
Okay, cool. So final verdict time. Is Circe worth the hype?
I would say yes, absolutely.
Okay.
It's beautifully written, it's thought-provoking, it offers a fresh perspective on a classic myth, but you do have to remember it is a slow burn.
Right.
So if you're looking for something fast-paced with a ton of action,
Yeah,
this might not be the book for you.
that's fair. I appreciate the honesty.
Yeah, of course, it's all about finding the right book for the right reader.
Exactly. Okay, well, before we wrap things up, I do have one more question for you.
Oh, okay.
If Circe were alive today, what modern-day issues do you think she would be most passionate about?
Oh, that's a great question. That really gets to the heart of what makes Circe so relevant.
I know, right?
She's a character who defies expectations, embraces her power, and fights for what she believes in.
Mhm.
So I think she'd be drawn to issues that reflect those themes. You know, things like gender equality,
Yeah,
women's
that's of
rights,
course.
challenging systems of oppression,
Makes sense.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a great note to end on. We've covered a lot of ground, but I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of what this book has to offer.
We definitely have, and that's the beauty of it. Circe is a book that stays with you long after you finish reading it.
I can't wait to dive in, and for all you listeners out there, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into Circe.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We'll be back soon with more insights and recommendations, so stay tuned.
It really does make you think. And you know, it's a book you can read multiple times.
Yeah, I can already tell. But okay, there's this one comparison that keeps coming to mind, and I'm curious to get your take.
Okay, yeah.
Does Circe remind you at all of The Witch's Heart?
Oh, that's an interesting one. They do both feature these strong female protagonists who also happen to be witches,
Yeah.
living kind of in isolation. But I think Circe goes a bit deeper into those themes of exile
Okay,
and the struggle for self-acceptance, you know?
I see what you mean. The Witch's Heart is great,
Yeah,
but it definitely leans more into the romance aspect.
exactly. Circe has romance in it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not the central focus. The focus is really on Circe's journey of self-discovery
Okay,
and her coming to terms with her own power.
right, right. And that's actually one of the things that's drawing me to Circe. I'm not always in the mood for a romance-heavy story,
I get that.
but I'm always down for a good character study.
And Circe is a phenomenal character study, but it's also a story about family, too.
Oh yeah, we haven't really talked about Circe's relationships with her family,
Right.
aside from, the whole being exiled by her father thing.
Right, exactly. And actually, her relationship with her sister Pasiphae is really fascinating.
Pasiphae, okay, that name rings a bell. She's the one who falls in love with the bull, right?
Yes. Talk about complicated family dynamic.
Yeah, that's a whole other story.
Their rivalry is intense. There's betrayal, manipulation.
Wow, some serious sibling drama going on there.
Oh, absolutely. It just adds another layer of complexity to Circe's character, though. You know?
Yeah.
She's dealing with all these difficult relationships while also trying to figure out her own place in the world.
Okay, you've officially sold me on this book. It's going on the top of my to-read list.
Awesome.
But okay, before we move on, I have to ask, for someone who might be a little hesitant about reading another Greek myth retelling, what would you say sets Circe apart? Like, what makes it worth their time?
It's that combination of things, you
Mhm.
know? The beautiful writing, a
Mhm.
compelling protagonist,
Yeah,
and a fresh perspective on these stories we all know.
I like that.
Circe isn't just retelling the myths, it's reimagining them, you know?
Right.
It gives a voice to a character who's often been overlooked or misunderstood.
Totally, and I think that's what I'm most excited about, seeing these stories through Circe's eyes
Yeah.
and getting a better understanding of her motivations and her journey.
I think you'll be really happy with it.
Well, this has been awesome. Thanks for sharing your insights.
Oh, of course. It's been fun.
I can't wait to start reading.
I hope you enjoy it.
For all of you listening out there, we hope you've enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.
Remember, Circe is a story about finding your power and embracing your true self,
That's right.
defying expectations.
Exactly.
That's a message that I think everyone can relate to, regardless of what they like to read.
Absolutely.
So if you're looking for a book that's both thought-provoking and beautifully written, Circe might just be the perfect fit.
We think so.
And with that, we'll leave you with one final thought. If Circe were alive today, what kind of woman would she be? What impact would she have on the world?
That's a good question.
We'd love to hear your answers, so feel free to share them on social media using the hashtag #TheDeepDive.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Until next time, happy reading. It's really amazing how these ancient myths
I know,
Right?
right?
can still spark these really interesting conversations.
Yeah, they really do. And I think it says a lot about how powerful stories are,
Mhm.
especially ones that explore these universal themes.
Yeah, like what?
Love, loss, the search for identity.
Right. And of course, power. I mean, Circe's whole journey is about understanding and claiming her power.
Yeah, even when everyone's telling her she's not worthy,
Exactly. It really makes you think about how we define power.
doesn't it?
It's not just about brute force or magic or whatever.
No, not at all.
It's about self-knowledge and resilience and having the courage to make your own choices.
I love that. You know, one thing that really stood out to me about Circe is how it flips the script on the whole hero's journey thing.
Oh, yeah? How so?
It's not about, slaying dragon or going on some epic quest. It's about finding your place in the world, even if that place is a little unconventional.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of refreshing, isn't it?
Oh, for sure.
We're so used to stories about, like, the classic hero
Yeah,
who saves the day and defeats the monster.
right.
But Circe is like a reminder that there's power in those quieter forms of resistance,
Exactly.
like choosing to be yourself, even if it means going against the grain.
Absolutely. And, those quieter forms of resistance, they can be just as challenging.
I think even more so
Yeah, maybe even more so.
than facing some, like, mythical beast.
Oh, totally. It takes so much courage to break free from expectations.
Yeah, especially those set by, like, family or society,
Exactly. And Circe shows us that whole journey.
with all the messiness and complications.
Oh, yeah, all of it.
It's a journey I think a lot of us can relate to,
Oh, absolutely.
even if we haven't, like, turned a sailor into a pig or whatever.
Right, exactly. And it's those universal human experiences that make Circe so powerful.
I agree, and I think that's why it's a book that really sticks with you.
It really does. Okay, so before we wrap up,
Yeah.
I have one last thought for our listeners to kind of chew on.
Okay, hit me.
If you could ask Circe one question, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good one. You know what? I think I would ask her what advice she would give to women today
Ooh, interesting.
who are still, fighting for their rights,
Yeah,
fighting for equality.
that's a great question. And it really gets at like the core of why Circe's so relevant today.
I know, right?
She's all about finding your voice and using it to create your own destiny.
Totally. And that message is just as important now as it was, like, thousands of years ago.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Circe.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
We hope you enjoyed this conversation
We had a blast.
and that it's inspired you to pick up this book.
Definitely check it out.
Until next time, happy reading.